Weapons. Weapons is how to. So this is the new film from writer-director Zach Cregger, who made Barbarian. Did you see Barbarian, Sanj?
I'm afraid I didn't.
Okay. Barbarian is I thought it was a really, really interesting film. But one of the things about it was it was a very, very hard film to review because it was one of those things in which what you didn't want to do was give away any of the reveals. And there is a reveal, like a very important reveal quite early on, which it's kind of hard to talk about the film without talking about it. But so this, again, is difficult to talk about, and I will try my very best to talk about it without spoiling it, okay? Like Barbarian, it has horror and satire intertwined. I watched it with no idea of where it was going. At the very beginning of the screening, one of the film distributors came out and said, incidentally, don't do any spoilers. Although it's like, yeah, we do try not to. Here's the setup. It begins with an image of Julia Garner, who I like very much, as a teacher, coming into a school and going into a classroom which is almost entirely empty. And over that, we hear a child's voiceover telling us this. Here's a clip.
This is a true story that happened in my town. So this one Wednesday is like a normal day for the whole school. But today was different. Every other class had all their kids. But Mrs. Gandy's room was totally empty. And you know why? Because the night before, at 2:17 in the morning, every kid woke up, got out of bed, walked downstairs, and into the dark. And they never came back.
So, very much a kind of fairy tale setup, like a kind of, the Brothers Grimm in America. So the town, Maybrook, Pennsylvania, is in shock. And since all the children that disappeared came from the same class, except one who has remained, the teacher, played by Julia Garner, is sort of vilified. The townsfolk think that she must have done something, that it's her fault. She must know why all these kids just walked out of their houses at 2:17 in the morning and disappeared into the dark. The only other person who may hold some, clues is this lonely bullied boy, Alex, who is the only one to turn up in class the next morning, but he's not saying anything and he's clearly traumatized. So the film is divided into character-named sections, which revisit a series of events in the aftermath of the disappearances. So we see these events from different perspectives. One of the perspectives is Josh Brolin's character, Archer, whose son Matthew has disappeared. He's convinced that the police aren't doing their job and that the teacher knows something. One of the perspectives is the teacher, played by Julia Garner. She is harassed by the townsfolk. She tries to talk to this young boy, the one kid that turned up, but she's forbidden to approach him. Another point of view is from a local policeman, played by Alden Ehrenreich, who has an altercation with a drug addict. And then we see the point of view of the addict. And that shows us a different point of view in the story. And each time, like Rashomon, the story changes. The details may sort of be the same, but the emphasis changes. Apparently, the writer-director took inspiration from Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia, which is a film that I love. And that connection makes sense because it's a series of, stories that may be intertwined, maybe intersect, but they just all happen to be taking place on the same street. The initial setup is really creepy. We see doorbell, nowadays doorbells have videos on them. So we see doorbell video footage of these kids running out into the night. They've got their arms out, like airplanes or something, and they just run. And it's really creepy. At one point, there is a sort of dreamy sequence in which Josh Brolin's character sees what appears to be, well, he's looking up, and at first you think he's seeing a spaceship, but then what he's seeing is a giant assault rifle floating in the air with 2:17, which is the time that the kids ran away. And I thought, okay, is it going to be about a school shooting? The classroom, it's a classroom of kids have disappeared. Is it that the townsfolk are all in trauma? But then that gets passed on, and the film moves somewhere else, takes a completely different turn, never returns to that image. Afterwards, Kim Newman, my great friend and the great horror critic of our time, I asked him about it, and I said, what do you think that was? And he said, I think it might just have been because weapons, because the title of the thing is weapons. Elsewhere, there are themes of contemporary American nightmares. So this is a place, there's conspiracy theories. There's decent people turning into lynch mobs. There's picket fences hiding foul deeds and secrets. There are God-fearing townsfolk turning on their kids' teachers, screaming at their kids' teachers for brainwashing their kids. So, it's a normal day in Trump's America. What I do know is that everything that follows, it's pretty head-scrambling. It's tonally very jarring. I mean, it mashes together elements of dread and horror with black humor and slapstick comedy and 18-rated violence. And incidentally, the 18-rated, the phrase peeling skin will never be the same again. It nods its head at a number of different sources. So, there's some of Toby Hooper's Poltergeist in there. Amy Madigan has a role which has a touch of Zelda Rubinstein in it. There's a bit of Nick Rogue's The Witches. There's actually someone scrawls the word witch on the side of a car very, very early on. There's quite a lot of the Twin Peaksy atmosphere of a small American hokey town with something really weird going on. There's a lot of Stephen King. I mean, not just that there is a clown-faced character who you see in flashes, but there's a lot of Stephen King in general. There's a bit of Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners, and there's even, for the older of us, there are sort of echoes of that 1995 science fiction film Screamers, in which there are these killer robots that look like children. Now, personally, I thought it worked best when things were unexplained, when that creepy voiceover at the beginning, what happened to the kids? Where did the kids go? Once the explanations come, obviously it narrows its options become more solidified. And I find that slightly less interesting. But there are several laugh out loud moments. There are some really well executed scares, and the overall mood veers from dread to mystery to Blimey Charlie, often within a single sequence. I'm not sure what it's ultimately about, except that it seemed to be very much about contemporary American nightmares. And I do think that feeling I had about what does that image of the gun, what is that? I think there is something about the terror of American high schools in the current climate. I think that is there somewhere. But I was never bored. Never. I mean, I was always thinking, what on earth is going to happen next? The performances were great. Particular plaudits to Julia Garner, who's never been less than fab. And Madigan, who I think it was really funny because just after the screening, there was a thing on social media that Kim Newman put up, which said, Amy Madigan for Best Supporting Actress, please. And if you're right, if horror films did win Oscars, that is a very, very good call. So for me, when it was most Twin Peaksy, it was best. There is a thing at the beginning in that voiceover which says the police and the top people in this town were not able to solve it. And I love that open-ended, not resolved. Music is really interesting. The writer-director is also contributing to the soundtrack. There are some great needle drops, including a brilliant use of George Harrison. And I thought it was, it's a smorgasbord. It is a full meal of stuff, and it doesn't all work, but there is enough in there that is genuinely kind of, oh gosh, and a couple of times I was really genuinely creeped out, and then a couple of times when I thought it was really funny and really tonally strange. So yeah, not quite sure whether it all comes together, but there's enough stuff in there that does to make it work.
Sounds interesting. Sounds certainly worth
it really
trekking up to Barnsley to watch it for a fiver.
It really is.